All right. So last time we classified matters based on their phase, but there's other types of ways to classify matter. You can classify based on its composition. Again, it's just another way to classify matter. So we can start off with matter. We're just going to call stuff, right? Has a mass and occupies some amount of volume. And so we can think about matter as two different categories. The first is we can think about a pure substance. And with a pure substance, we only have one thing. We'll define thing in a bit here. And then we can think about it as a mixture. In a mixture, we have more than one thing. And then we could further group further distinguish pure substances and mixtures. So for a pure substance, we can break that off into two main categories. Again, be careful with categories. There will always be exceptions. So on the left side, we can go with elements. And so elements or things that we call pure elements are only made out of one type of element. So there's only one type of element. And so remember from our last video or from our previous video that we have the periodic table of elements. So if you're wondering whether something is an element or not, we can take a look at the periodic table of elements. And if you find it there, it's an element. If you can't find it there, it's not an element. So for example, an element could be something like an iron bar. So if you have a bar that's purely iron, iron is indeed an element. If we find it on our periodic table, it's right there called Fe. So that would be a pure substance that's an element, right? Another example would be a gold ring. Gold is also found on the periodic table. It's found as Au right there, right? A little bit of a weird one there. Again, it's found on the periodic table, so it's an element. However, pure things don't just have to be one element. They could be more than one element. We call those compounds. So a compound is we have more than one element, but they're connected with chemical bonds or by chemical bonds. It's probably a better way to word it. So more than one element connected with chemical bonds. And we'll learn what chemical bonds are later. An example of this that we used is water, right? So most people know that water is H2O. And so you can see that this has more than one element in it, but it's still only one thing, right? In this case, that thing is a compound. So a glass of water is a pure substance, but it's a compound because it's made out of these molecules of water. In terms of mixtures, right, we now have more than one thing. And so we can classify these generally as homogeneous mixtures or heterogeneous mixtures. In a homogeneous mixture, it's going to look the same everywhere. So for example, if we have a bottle of orange Gatorade, right, it looks the same everywhere, right? If you have some Gatorade, it's orange, it's a liquid, and it's like that everywhere. But if we think about what composes Gatorade, we see that it's more than just one element or compound. So for example, Gatorade is mostly water, right, which we learned is H2O, but it's not just water, right? Most Gatorade usually has sugar in it. And then it also has salt in it, which is the electrolytes, right? Salts are electrolytes. So it's just basically a marketing thing, right? They say electrolytes, they just mean salt. So you can see that Gatorade is a mixture of things, but it looks the same everywhere. On the other side, we have heterogeneous. Again, it's more than one thing, but it looks different in different places. Maybe an example of this is like an egg, right? It's obviously more than one thing. It's actually a lot of different things. We call this a fried egg, I guess. But it's white on the outside, and then it has that yellow yolk in the middle, right? Depending where you look at it, it looks different. So again, this is just another way to categorize materials. Not super important, but know the basics.